Welcome to another deep dive. We love taking these fascinating stories and really digging into what we can learn from them.
Yeah, and I think today's is going to be a good one.
Oh, absolutely. Today we're going to be looking at how a simple conversation between a mother and daughter in Bangalore, uh,
Mhm.
it really became this catalyst for some major societal change. And it's really inspiring.
Very much so. And I think what's really interesting is that we get to see the whole thing unfold through the mother's perspective
Right.
because she actually wrote about this whole experience. So we're working with an excerpt today where she talks about this pivotal moment and the dialogue with her daughter.
Okay. And you said this happened in Bangalore.
Yes, the author was the head of the computer science department at a local college in Bangalore.
Wow. Okay, so we're dealing with someone in academia.
Yes, very much so. And the story takes place in late February.
Oh, so right at the cusp of spring.
Exactly. Winter's ending. There are hints of summer in the air. The author's actually in the midst of preparing for an upcoming exam committee meeting.
Oh, I can imagine the stacks of syllabi and question papers.
Absolutely. A very familiar scene for anyone who's been in academia. But in the midst of all this, we meet her daughter, Akshata.
Akshata.
Yes. And she's described as a remarkably sensitive young person. Even as a teenager, she was already deeply involved in volunteer work.
Oh, wow. What kind of volunteer work?
She was reading and scribing for blind children at the Ramana Maharshi Academy for Blinds in Bangalore.
That's pretty incredible for a teenager to be so engaged in something like that. It speaks volumes about her character.
It really does. And we get a further glimpse into her thoughtful nature through her essay.
Oh, she wrote an essay about this experience.
She did. It's titled, I Saw the World Through the Blind Eyes of Mary.
That's a really powerful title. And who is Mary?
So Mary was one of the students that Akshata was helping at the academy. She was helping her prepare for her pre-university exams.
That's fantastic.
Hmm.
And it's interesting that she talks about seeing the world through someone else's eyes. That must have been a really insightful experience for her.
It definitely seems to have been. There's this very touching anecdote that the author shares about Akshata taking Mary to Lalba.
Lullaby.
Yes, it's that beautiful botanical garden in Bangalore.
Oh, right. I've heard of it. It's supposed to be stunning.
It really is. So Akshata takes Mary there, and as they're walking through the garden, she starts describing the various red roses. And Mary, in her innocence, asks, Akshata, what do you mean by red?
Wow. That must have been a real moment of realization for Akshata.
Absolutely. She immediately understood that she couldn't rely on visual descriptions and how frustrating that could be for someone who couldn't see, so she very intuitively shifted her approach.
How so?
Well, instead of focusing on the visual, she started talking about the things that they could both experience.
Mm.
The smell of the roses, the sounds of the
It's
birds.
amazing. It really shows her empathy and ability to adapt to someone else's perspective.
It does, and I think this experience is really important to keep in mind as we move forward in the story. It gives us a sense of Akshata's sensitivity and her understanding of different ways of experiencing the world.
That's a great point. So we have Akshata, this very empathetic and perceptive teenager,
Yeah.
and then we have Anand Sharma.
Yes. Anand is another student at the school where Akshata volunteers. He's described as this bright, jolly, blind boy. He was the only child of a school teacher from Bihar.
Oh, so he wasn't even from Bangalore.
No. And just like Mary, he was also preparing for his second pre-university exam.
Okay. So he was a little older than Mary.
Yes, it seems so. But what's important is that he had these big aspirations for his future. He wanted to study at St. Stephen's College in Delhi.
St. Stephen's, that's a highly regarded institution.
It is. But his background, being from a poor family, being an only child, and having no support system in a big city like Delhi, all these things made his aspirations really challenging to fulfill.
It sounds like he had a lot stacked against him.
He did. And Akshata was very aware of this, which is what leads us to this pivotal conversation. So, the author is at home, still working on her exam preparations when Akshata comes into her room.
Huh?
And she's looking worried and tired. And as a mother would, she initially thinks, oh, she must be stressed about her exams.
It's a natural assumption, right?
It is, especially since they had this family philosophy of not pressuring their children about academics too much.
That's good. They wanted them to enjoy their childhood and not get bogged down by studies.
Exactly. But it turns out that Akshata's worry wasn't about her own exams at all.
Oh, so what was she worried about?
She was worried about Anand. She starts talking about how bright he is and how much potential he has and how much she wants to go to St. Stephen's.
Okay.
But then she brings up his lack of support and resources. He was poor and had no one to help him navigate life in an expensive city like Delhi.
Right, and as someone who had worked closely with him, she probably understood his situation better than most.
Exactly. So while the author's still kind of preoccupied with her work, she absentmindedly suggests that maybe Akshata could help him financially.
It's a kind thought, but maybe not the most practical.
And Akshata immediately points this out. She's like, Amma, where would I get the money to support a boy in a Delhi hostel?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. Where would she get the money?
Right. So the author, realizing her initial suggestion was a bit unrealistic, tries to come up with another solution. She says, well, maybe you could forego your birthday party.
A birthday party.
Yeah, and use the money you saved to sponsor an und.
It's interesting she mentions that they usually have small birthday celebrations anyway.
Yeah, it was a family tradition. And they didn't give their children regular pocket money either.
So even this suggestion, while more doable, was still asking Akshata to make a sacrifice.
Absolutely. And it's Akshata's response to this suggestion that really changes everything.
Okay, what did she say?
Well, she doesn't just agree or disagree with the idea. Instead, she asks her mother this really thought-provoking question.
What was the question?
She basically asks her mom about her own responsibility to help those less fortunate. She brings up her mother's education, her travel, her knowledge, and how she doesn't seem to care about money or material things.
So she's pointing out her privilege and asking her to examine her own actions.
Exactly. And she even mentions how her mother comes from a long line of teachers, like her grandfather.
Oh, so it's like she's invoking this family legacy of helping others.
Right. And then she says something that's so powerful, so insightful, especially coming from a teenager.
What does she say?
She says, Amma, when an educated person like you, well-traveled, well-read, and without love for money does not help poor people, then don't expect anyone else to do. Is it not your duty to give back to those unfortunate people?
Wow, that is a lot to unpack. It's like she's challenging her mother's entire worldview.
She is. She's basically saying, if you, with all your advantages, don't help, then who will?
Right, it's not enough to just not be greedy. You have to actively do something to help.
Exactly. And the author really takes this to heart. She describes how she immediately stopped what she was doing, abandoned her search for her documents, and was just struck by the weight of her daughter's words.
It sounds like a real moment of reckoning for her.
It was. She says she felt this internal conflict, this wrestling with her own sense of duty.
Did she talk to Akshata more about it right then?
Well, she had this meeting to get to, so she mentions that she attended the meeting, but afterwards she sought out solitude to really think about what Akshata had said.
It's interesting how she distinguishes solitude from loneliness.
Right, like it was a conscious choice to be alone with her thoughts.
And what were those thoughts?
Well, she starts reflecting on her life. She was 45 at the time, she had a successful career at Infosys, a loving family, and yet she felt like something was missing.
Like she hadn't quite fulfilled her purpose.
Exactly. And then she remembers something. J.R.D. Tata's parting advice to always give back to society.
J.R.D. Tata, the legendary industrialist and philanthropist.
That's right. And it's as if Akshata's words had unlocked something in her mind, making this advice suddenly click into place.
So what did she do?
She made a decision, a conscious, deliberate decision to dedicate the rest of her life to helping others. And she describes feeling this incredible sense of relief and rejuvenation afterwards.
Wow. And it all stemmed from that conversation with Akshata.
It did. And what's remarkable is that it wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a rational one, arrived at after careful consideration of her values and priorities.
So it wasn't just an emotional reaction to her daughter's words, it was a real shift in her perspective.
Exactly. And this shift led to some pretty big changes in her life.
Like what?
Well, she resigned from her position as head of the computer science department.
She left her job.
She did.
Wow.
She chose to focus on teaching instead,
Yeah.
which gave her more time and flexibility to pursue her newfound mission.
It's incredible how much one conversation can change the course of a life.
It really is. And the author repeatedly emphasizes how grateful she is to Akshata for this transformation. She says that it brought her more happiness and satisfaction than any academic achievement or material wealth ever could.
It sounds like she truly found her calling.
And think about the ripple effect of this transformation. It eventually led to the establishment of the Infosys Foundation.
The Infosys Foundation, right? I've heard of that.
Yeah, they do some amazing work for underprivileged communities all across India.
So it wasn't just a personal transformation, it had a huge impact on society as a whole.
Absolutely. And years later, when the Infosys Foundation received the Economic Times Award for Corporate Citizen, the author insisted that Akshata be there to accept it with her.
Even though she was studying in the USA at that point.
Yes. She wanted to publicly acknowledge Akshata's crucial role in this whole journey.
That's incredibly powerful. It shows just how much she valued her daughter's contribution.
It does. And the author ends by talking about the profound satisfaction she gets from seeing the positive impact of the Foundation's work, seeing the hope and smiles on the faces of the people they've helped.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? Making a real difference in the world.
It is. So, to sum it all up, this deep dive has really been about how a simple question from a daughter sparked a huge change in her mother's life, a change that had a ripple effect and touched countless lives.
And it all boils down to this idea of duty and responsibility and the power of a young person's perspective to challenge the status quo.
Absolutely. Because at its core, it really comes back to that one powerful question that Akshata asked: is it not your duty to give back? And it's a question we should all be asking ourselves, regardless of our background or circumstances.
It's a call to action for all of us, to examine our own lives, to recognize our privilege, and to find ways to contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the inspiration for that contribution comes from the most unexpected source. A conversation with a loved one, a moment of reflection, a piece of advice that suddenly resonates in a new way.
Food for thought. That's what we like to leave our listeners with. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
Take care.